Welcome to Raising Eight, the podcast that proves a full house is more than just a TV show. Meet the dad who's raised 8 kids and 2 grandkids under one roof and has the scars and dad jokes to show for it. Grab a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and let's talk family, big family.
Good morning, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. This is Raising Eight, episode 12. You can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. I almost forgot my email address. Or you can get a hold of me on social media. Listen, I'm really happy you guys are listening because my numbers are going up. It's exactly what I want to do. But do me a favor, if you go to my YouTube channel and listen to the full podcast, even if you don't listen to the full podcast, subscribe to my channel and hit and share and like and do all those things. You know, we've done 11 episodes already in the Raising Eight genre, and we have much more to come. I have some more new guests that are coming on. I have a guest on Friday that will drop next week. It's a must see. It's going to be a riot. It's very adding a lot of levity to raising kids, and you know, a lot of times I'm getting serious about things about, you know, how you deal with your kids' behavior and things like that, which is all important, but there's a fun side of it too, and we're going to talk a lot about that on Friday. So we've had a lot of different guests on. We've had clinical psychologists, we've had family counselors, we've had people about education, we've done a few other things, and we had a talk about AI, and all those things are super important. Now, looking back as a baby boomer, when if we weren't college bound, our job was to get a good job, and then if you had any ambition or drive, you would try to move up at that company. And what that would mean, maybe you need to, work extra hours or take on more responsibility. Because if you have a family and you're trying to raise these kids, I got news for you, you're going to need money. And I've always had a lot of ambition. Even before I had children, I wanted to move up, get in leadership roles and things like that. And it was just always my thing to do that. But we haven't talked about how you balance that career, excuse me, that career piece and raising kids, because it's definitely a big deal, and it's a big part of raising kids. Now, if you've had kids conventionally and you've met your wife and they got married and then had kids, and I was lucky enough that my first 2 wives were able to stay home most of the time during our marriage, and they were able to take care of the kids while I was at work. It wasn't on me to take care of them all the time. Now, eventually I became a single dad and I had to do that. Well, let's talk about that first piece first. So here you are, you're going to work every day, you're kissing the kids, kissing the wife, you go to work all day and you're doing whatever at work you have to do. And if, like I said, if you have ambition, you're trying to do extra things. I know when I worked at Pepsi, when I was married to my first wife, I did a lot of things that I didn't get paid for in special events and things like that. I was doing those things because I knew if I was, that person that was going to show the effort and do those extra things, that eventually if a promotion was available, I'd be able to get that promotion and move into a different pay grade, I guess, if you want to say. All these things, these diapers and all this stuff is expensive, feeding them, rent, all these things. You got to have a car, you got to do all these things. It's tough to balance, right? So if you're going to, like I said, I did a lot of things on the weekends and at night, and left my wife with the kids, so she had that additional burden. And even though she was enjoying the extra money, or at least being able to buy the things we needed, she also had an extra burden on her that I didn't have, because I was at work doing those things and she was at home with kids. And after you've been at home with kids for 8 hours at a time, or 9-10 hours, and then I go out again because I'm going to do more work, it's more burden on her, and it's strain on a relationship. It's a strain on her. But it's just one of those things you have to do. A couple of my kids now are able to work out of the house, which we didn't have that option when I was a kid. I mean, I was out delivering Pepsi. I could not do that, obviously, from home. Some of the jobs now that people have IT jobs and things like that, they can actually work out of the home and have a child there and, kind of help out. I have a couple kids that actually, both the people in the household, son and daughter-in-law, or excuse me, daughter and son-in-law, have IT jobs and they're able to do their job and kind of manage the kids and, juggle all those things, but it's not easy. I know in my second marriage, I was traveling a lot. So I had an outside sales job that I was traveling the 11 Western states. Now, I was primarily on the West Coast and in Arizona and Nevada, but I would go out of town sometimes every other week. Again, leaving my wife with this burden of having to take care of the kids 24 hours a day with no help. I couldn't afford to bring someone in to help them. And even at one point, my second marriage, my wife had a daycare where she was watching other people's kids on top of that and our kids. And it was a lot of work. Now, when I was traveling, I'd be out of town and I wasn't not necessarily having a bad time, but I wasn't having a good time either. I much rather would rather been home with my family, but that's what I had to do at the time. And I was making a lot better money. Uh, out there traveling. So we had more things, but our time was limited. So it's a trade-off, right? You gotta be able to manage these things. When you get into a leadership position, it even takes more time. And I wish I only worked 40 hours a week back then. But I used to get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and drive, all day and go to dinner by the time I was by myself. And then by the time I got to bed, it was 9 or 10 o'clock, driving to that next destination. So juggling that was difficult. And then I was away from, those daily tasks, the walking them to school and doing all those things. And it was definitely hard. And I know a lot of you dads out there are juggling things and even more prevalent now, although I don't talk a lot about mom's views on these things. When I was working as a young man and my wives were staying home, there wasn't as many women in the workforce, especially in leadership positions. And there's a lot more of that going on now. So you take well, there were single moms, but they were doing, I don't even want to say this because it sounds like I'm not demeaning them. They would have jobs that were, more regular hours. And they might have had to take jobs like that because they had kids. And daycare, don't even get me started on daycare, is so expensive. And I know some of you out there are paying for daycare. You almost have to have one person working in a house just to pay for daycare. It's so expensive. And I know I'm getting hurt by the economy just like you, and things are so expensive, and you got to keep grinding, right? But this goes to all the other things we've talked about as parents that we have to pay attention to. And it's very difficult when we're really focused on, having that income and having those careers. And since your kids are going to get older and they're going to get easier to take care of in the aspect of they're not going to have to be watched every 2 minutes. Um, you've got to set yourself up for those promotions and those, leadership positions if that's something you want to do, or longer hours or whatever it is. If you want to have a career in your life, it's very difficult to have a career and have children. And I'd be out of town at these national sales meetings, most of the men that I was with, because it was mostly men, had kids and they felt there was a definite, it was working their nerves a little bit. It was difficult to be away from your family when you're out, taking a week here and there and learning about, products and basically going to class. And like I said, it wasn't fun being there, but they had events that were fun to go to. But of course, we didn't have our spouses at those events because we were maybe in Wisconsin or, Atlanta, uh, or Georgia. I wasn't in Atlanta, but I was in Georgia, uh, here and there. And then if I take an extra incentive and took some customers out of town to a factory, that added another burden on, my spouse. So like I said, this is very difficult. And now you have to deal with all the normal stuff with the kid, with their schoolwork, with all these things. And it was on my wives to do that because I was traveling and out of town and they had to take up that responsibility. Now, when I was a single parent, now it caused a whole nother issue because I couldn't accept jobs that I traveled in. In fact, I had a job at one time when I first met my current wife, and I might have been right before I met her. And I had to go on a business trip. I had to go to Chicago for like 4 days, and it was fine. My ex-wife took my kids for those 4 days while I was out of town, and I had expressed to this manager that I couldn't travel on these long weekends or whatever it was, because mostly trade shows were on the weekends. And So I was working for him, and we got gone to Chicago. I got that trip worked out. And then when we came back in town, I was traveling up and down the coast when my ex had the kids. And he came to me and said, "Look, we need to go to New Orleans for 4 days. There's this big trade show out there." And I said, "Look, dude, I told you that's just something I cannot do. I cannot go on these long trips. I'm a parent and I have to be home with my children." And it actually ended my job because I couldn't make this trip. And he was upset about it because he apparently didn't listen to me when I told him. And it wasn't his fault. It was I had the kids. It wasn't his fault. He couldn't change the trade show. So as I got away from jobs that had so much traveling, I was able to work in town 99% of the time, but there were still training things I would have to go out and do. And as a single parent, although Kit was in my life, my current wife was in my life, she was helping with a lot of these things. I didn't leave town very often uh, as a single parent. I was doing local jobs that sucked, and I couldn't get promotions because I was limited in my time. When I was married to my first wife, I went to school full time and had a full time job, and Um, I used to work every day of the week. Go to school one day. I go to school one day, work 4 days a week, and then work all day Saturday. Another burden on her, and that's on me. That's my, that was just a situation. But I needed income, and I needed to, chase these jobs that were, a little bit more, um, that would pay better. As Kit and I, after we were married and we were moving through, I had a really good job in the HVAC business, and then I had some other jobs after that when that one finished. And again, I was that guy to volunteer for things. I was trying to volunteer at church. I was doing a lot of, school activities with the kids as a group and running groups. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One, it kept me close to the kids when I was at these groups, but it also showed the kids that you really need to get back in life and volunteer. Up until about 6 weeks ago, I was volunteering at the senior center once a week, and it really felt good. I really liked doing that. I've had to slow down on that and maybe stop it at this point because I have some other obligations that I'm getting involved with. So I feel you guys out there trying to have a career and move forward and everything. And you're also trying to raise your kids and be good parents. Now, if you have weekends off, that's great. I've generally in my life, I've had weekends off, so I was able to spend time with the kids. But it's that day-to-day stuff that, I had to put on my ex-wives to, to do that I wasn't there, on a regular basis. And I guess us baby boomers probably had this thought that, we're like the cavemen that have to go out and hunt the food, and our wives are just to stay at home. And well, times have changed. It's not like that anymore. And I've worked for some wonderful women in my life and worked with some wonderful women that have kids that were managing both. And some of them are just rock stars. Most of them are just rock stars. And they had to, they're managing those things that I guess husbands used to manage in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So it's not an easy thing to do. And I'm looking over at some notes. And then when we had grandkids, we kind of flipped back to elementary school. We went from raising these kids and get them through high school, and then we're back in elementary school, which requires a little bit more personal time with the kids. And thank God by that time I had a little bit. I've always had jobs that I was able to get to the kids' events and things like that. Being in sales, I could kind of work around, a lot of schedules. But some people can't do that. And I know it's hard when you cannot do that. If you're a construction worker, for instance, and you're at work at 5 in the morning, you're there all day. It's not like you can leave, go see a kids event and then come back. Very difficult. So I was lucky in that I had jobs like that. And I sought out jobs like that too. It wasn't just luck. I was needing to have time with my children. When you have 8 kids, there's a lot going on. I've told you before, we had 5 girls in 4 sports at one time, and we were dashing all over the county. And a daughter that played travel soccer. So we didn't leave the state. We were going up to things up in North, LA and Orange County and things like that. And then we had a softball player that was traveling every Sunday. She played I think they played doubleheader every Sunday, so we were always moving around for that. So I feel you guys out there, and I know that you're working your ass off to try to raise kids and deal with all the things we've talked about in 11 episodes about taking care of how they feel and how they learn differently. And you're doing all these things. And on top of that, you're dealing with people at work, you're dealing with customers. And I'm not insulting customers or people you work with, but sometimes they're harder to manage than your kids are because you don't know them as well. But they're doing some of the same things behaviorally, especially if people are working for you. I was always very respectful of a mom or a dad that needed to be off for an event, because of my history. Um, and if somebody called in and said, "Look, I just can't make it today. I don't have anybody to watch the kids." So when you're taking your kids to daycare and they get sick, the daycare says, "We can't take your kid," which makes sense. They can't, they cannot bring a sick child in there, at the risk of getting other kids sick. So it's all these things you pile on yourself that you probably don't think about when you have kids. And if there was some kind of way to get you to understand that there's a lot of there's a lot of work you could do up front to make rearing children easier. Their personalities, their DNA, none of that's going to change. You're going to get what you get when it comes to that. Imagine dealing with somebody with a special needs child. I know some people that have to deal with kids that have special needs, and you can't count on a school district or anybody else to take care of that child, and you get to know this child. In fact, there's a good chance I'm going to have somebody on my podcast about this exact thing, that somebody that has kids that have special needs. So there's just all these things. I mean, I've been telling you for 11 episodes, and I'm telling you again, having kids isn't easy. And it's rewarding, it's joyous a lot of times, but a lot of times it's a lot of work. But as you see the kids progressing and you see them starting to get those aha moments in life where they figure out a math situation, or they really enjoy learning about something, or they're performing high in sports or academics or music or whatever they're doing, those are those tiered moments, right? Those are those moments that you're so proud of your child. And I'm going to tell you, you should give permission to yourself to be proud of you too. If you're doing all these things and your kids are, you know, uh, exceeding at what they're trying to do, it's because of you. It's because of you spent time with them. It's not all natural ability. I got news for you. These super athletes that you see, these guys work so hard at what they have to do. And we have some kids like that really, some of them are natural students, some of them struggle a little bit. And if you're normal at all, you're going to have a kid that struggles somewhere, somehow, where you're going to have to help them out and put a little extra effort in there. And they'll be different than your other kids too, which is a trip. It always blows me away how different my kids are, having grown up in the same household. So, like I said, there's a lot of work to having kids and trying to have a career on top of that. And you have goals in your life and you have aspirations and trying to achieve those while you're teaching your kids that they want to achieve those. But something that's important, understand that your kids are watching you and it's not your job. They're not the most important thing in your household. You and your wife are the most important thing. If you're not married or whatever, whoever's bringing in that income, whoever's putting that food on the table, has to be the priority, because if you don't have that, the kids don't have what they need. And it's nice to put a lot of energy into your kids, but the reality is your relationship with your spouse, baby daddy, whatever you want to call it, whoever, the parents of this child, you need to work together, and you're the most important thing in that household. And listen, your children are going to get to an age where they don't really need that day-to-day thing. I just said this a minute ago. And then you're going to have to turn the heat up on your career. If you're not where you want to be and you want to get further, you want to get more educated, you want to do all these things, they're watching you take the initiative to get more educated. So I read a lot. Not lately, but over the years, I've listened to or read several books. I always wanted to educate myself more, get smarter. I'm reading books about AI now. I'm learning more about all these things that are going on in the world. when it comes to, listen, this podcast, I figured this podcast out with a couple little lessons from a friend of mine. And, I've got this thing worked out. Somebody the other day said, how long does it take you to edit a video? Well, I'm so fast at it now. By the way, I don't edit any of these videos. If I say something, I don't cut it out. If I cough or sneeze or whatever, I don't cut it out. Maybe once in a while if it's something prolonged. You just learn these things, and I hope you never stop learning, and you teach your kids never to stop learning. We had a deep conversation about this with Chris Linder, who's an educator, about how we never want to stop learning. We need to teach our kids how to learn, and we need to learn how to learn too. Hopefully we figured it out by the time we're adults, and we know how to assimilate information and know how we learn the fastest and the most efficiently. So it's all important, and all these things that are going on in your life. And when you add kids into the mix, you gotta set that example for them. They're really watching what you do. They're watching how you handle your relationships. For you men, they're watching how you treat women. They're watching everything you do. And if you're doing something, and if you're divorced and you're, criticizing the mom, which I did, I did everything wrong when I got divorced from my exes. I said things to the kids, I said things to them. And looking back, it was a lot of wasted energy. And I know it's difficult. I know some of you might be angry about it. I don't know, your situation, obviously, but you have to consider the kids, how they're assimilating what you're saying and how you're treating their mother, whether you love her or not, whether you hate her or not. You need to keep it to yourself and not get the kids involved in that. They've already been through enough. If you've gone through a divorce, they've already been through enough. They don't need to know. You don't need to be complaining about work and things like that. You need to be giving the kids positive reinforcement, teaching them how to find the good things in what you're doing. I've made a lot of money in jobs that I didn't like, and I've made a little money in jobs that I loved. Now, as contradicting as that sounds, you probably understand what I'm saying. I had really fun jobs that I probably would have stayed in if they paid me more, but I just had to do something because I had these kids that required all these things. And 8 kids is expensive in San Diego, especially. Um, so, but you have to be grateful, and you have to teach your kids to have gratitude. They need to be grateful for you and grateful for the schools they're going to and grateful for the things they have, not the things that they want. If they want those things later in life, they can work for those things. You learn a lot about material things versus those times spent together. I mean, we have the holidays coming up right now, and the holidays just aren't the same as they used to be when we had the kids at home and there was all this build up to, Halloween and Christmas and Thanksgiving, all this build up. And without the kids being here on a regular basis, it's almost become a burden for the holidays. It's like, not again, I got to get this stuff out and we just decorated the house for Halloween and I got to take it down this weekend. But I don't do it for me. I could care less, but I do it for the kids. Christmas to me has it's more religious than anything anymore. Yes, we have the grandkids and they'll come by and they'll stop by and we'll do what we can. They have everything they need. So as far as gifts go, we don't really have to, go out and shower them with these gifts. Their parents are all doing very well and they're getting taken care of. It's just that time you want to spend together. But not everybody lives in the neighborhood anymore, and the burden is on them to have to drag these kids here and there. I don't have any kids to drag anywhere, so um, it's a good problem and a bad problem to have because I really do miss, how the holidays work. But it kind of all goes back to what I'm talking about, all this work and things you do. Kit is in a position in a job where she gets time off during the holidays. I'm starting a new job that I'm not going to have any time. In fact, it's going to have more time in the holidays working. And it's just a supplemental thing for me to do, but it's required right now. So listen, there's not much more to talk about. You guys are out there, you're grinding, you're trying to keep these families together and also work and have your own ambitions and your own goals, and you need to keep those going. The kids are watching you. I believe me, they are watching how you handle this. If you give up, it makes it easier for them to give up. And I know you're not going to give up, but You need to continue that ambition and continue that drive that you have and teach your kids to have that. Now, I have some kids that are interested in moving up and doing better and they have these grand goals, and I have some other kids that are fine, just they're happy what they're doing right now. That's fine with me. It's not my business what they want to do. Um, it seems less stressful for the kids that don't want to move up or anything, but they have their own set of stress, believe me. And they're all doing fine. And I just wanted to do this podcast prior to a couple more guests that I'm going to have on, kind of just talking about, listen, I get it, and you need to get it that it's okay to be ambitious while you have kids. Use it as a positive lesson for your children and not just something selfish. I know it's not selfish on your part, but you have to focus on your work. It's if you don't, your kids don't have anything. So, but you got to find that balance, right? Hopefully you have time off that you can spend with your kids and you're talking to them on a regular basis. That communication I've talked about is key. The communication with your spouse or the other parent is key. But I can tell you that gratitude and positivity goes much further than hate and anger and all those things that I did. And I regret those things. I can't change them now. We don't have that relationship now with my ex-wives. We can talk on a regular basis about the kids and whatever, aspect is on the table. And I'm glad for that because frankly, I don't have the energy and I just don't want the negativity. I just want positive things. So you got to be injecting those positive things into your kids all the time. And on just one more note, I'm not saying injecting things that aren't real or that are impossible or things like that into your kids. It's just that attitude you bring to the table about your job, about your relationship with your other parent, about your work relationships, things like that. And I can just give you this advice. They should hear a lot of positivity coming out of you, not just negative stuff. Negative stuff will not go away. It is in the world and it'll never go away. In fact, it could be getting worse at this point. But you have the power to communicate with those kids with a positive attitude and give them hope and teach them that they have the skills and they're valued. They're very valued. They're intrinsic value to humanity. Their personality, their individual gifts that they have are huge. They're not going to do something they don't love. And if they can do something they love, you know how much easier work is going to be. So this is the Ed Franklin Raising Eight podcast, episode 12. Hold on, there's some good ones coming. I guarantee you, these guests, the one on Friday is going to be a riot. But like I said, that podcast won't drop until next week. So you can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com or hit me up on my social media. But I actually have one more. I'm going to talk negatively to you just for a second. On social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I put out suggestions of topics and I got no response back. There's got to be something you want me to talk about after having 8 kids. I'm trying to do everything I can to come up with content. And my guests are the key because they come up with really good content. But you've got to have some questions. And if you have some questions, send me an email or DM me on my social media, something that you want to hear about. I'd be glad to talk about anything. I'm Mr. Vulnerable. So if I don't want to talk about it, I'll tell you straight out. But for the most part, I'm an open book. If you want me to talk about a certain topic or how we handled certain things, just let me know. I may do a live podcast here soon, which is nice because people can ask questions, but it's also difficult to figure out the timing of that. So you can get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. Keep listening, keep liking, keep looking at my clips, keep sharing everything you can. Look at my YouTube channel, subscribe when you're there. Watch the full video. This one's not too long. It should be an easy one to watch. Of course, if you've watched it up to now, you know that. So anyway, I appreciate you listening. Things are getting better and we're getting more stuff going on. So have a great weekend. Happy Halloween, and we'll talk to you all soon.